Hello, dear. It's Heather, and you're watching Save Today with Heather J. I'm somebody who has spent her entire adult life living paycheck to paycheck and being one life event away from financial crisis. I don't like that. It doesn't feel good. It's very scary when you get into those life events, and it's time for that to change. So I've created this budget to get myself out of that rut. I've created this channel to share the journey with others because I find that hard things are significantly easier when we have company. Because I have such a little amount of money and so big bills and big things I want, I find budgeting to be very discouraging. So I have decided to create some positivity for myself by bringing my creativity into the back end of my channel. This gives me something to look forward to kind of combat those rough days. Today, I'm going to be going over my paycheck number 1 closeout for the month of August. So for me, August paycheck number 1 goes from the 28th of July to the 10th of August. And I have to set my months up based on, I get paid every other week. And so whichever paycheck has the first of the month in it, that's when my month starts. So my month does not go from the first of the month to the 31st of the month. It goes from whatever paycheck encompasses that, the first. Because my rent is due on the first and that is set up in auto pay, I don't have any flexibility in that. And so that's when my months have to start. That does mean that they never start close to time and they don't finish exactly on the end of the month. So there will be times where my month starts like in the middle of the month prior. And that's just the way it works for me at this time. Maybe at some other point I will have enough set ahead that I can start budgeting from the 1st to the 30th and just know that I have enough there to cover those things until the checks come in, but I am nowhere near that yet. So for me, when I set up my budget estimate, I estimate my hourly wages times the rough amount of hours I'm going to be working times the 2 weeks, and I take away my taxes. And when I set this up, I estimated I was going to be bringing home $1,188.45. What I actually brought home on the 28th of July was $1,271.74, which means my income was $83.20 more than I had estimated it would be. I include another line in my income, but I don't ever consistently have anything other that would go in this line. I don't have a second job. I do not receive child support. I do not have any kind of investments, annuities, rental properties, anything where I would be getting some sort of consistent, regular payments for. But I include this in case there is something that changes. Maybe I get a second job in the middle of the month. Maybe I get a tax return. Maybe I get some kind of rebate or inheritance. That is what that other line is for. So that will most frequently be zero. So my total income was $1,271.74. Again, over my estimate by $83.29. The next thing I go over is my fixed expenses. My fixed expenses are my bills, the things I'm required to pay, whether I like it or not. Somebody else sets the rates and I have to pay it or pay fines, and they just have to be paid. So some of these are fixed. My rent is very consistently the $853, but things like my utilities will fluctuate. So some of those things are going to be actually fixed, and some of them are technically flexible in that they move, but I count them as fixed because they are required. So for this first paycheck, I had rent due at $853. That is what I paid. There was no difference, and that was the only fixed expense I paid during this pay period. So fixed expenses was just that $853. The next thing I go over in my monthly and my paycheck 1 and 2 setups and follow closeouts is my flexible spending. My flexible spending is the things I do have some control over: my groceries, my dining out, my transportation, my art, and miscellaneous. Those things, I can choose where I go. I can choose how much I'm willing to spend. And I'm not required to pay anything until I'm standing there in line with the things in my hand. And again, I can choose to go to a Whole Foods, all organic type grocery store and pay top dollar, or I can go to, a canned goods, end of the line, bargain basement type grocery store. So this week in my groceries, or this paycheck, I guess, in my groceries, I had estimated $140 a week, for a total of $280 this paycheck. In the months prior to this, I had only given myself $110 a week, which was not enough. So I bumped it up just a tiny bit more, and I felt like that probably wasn't going to be enough. And for this pay period, it was not. I did spend $320.49, which was $40.49 over my budget, or over my estimate for this pay period. I'm not terribly upset by that. I did make one really good kind of bulk up, plan ahead, big grocery shopping, and then a couple of smaller grocery shoppings. So we'll see how the next couple of weeks carry out, but I think when I can, I do need to give myself a little bit more in the groceries budget, because it's still not quite enough, it's looking like. Then in the dining out, I gave myself $0 for this month's budget. I really wanted to, I knew when I gave myself $0 that it was not going to be realistic for me. There was definitely going to be some grocery spending, but I kind of missed the plot this particular pay period, most specifically in week 2 of this pay period. I spent $169 on dining out this week. Now, I did have a family member who went in for surgery just before this pay period started. So there was a lot of being stretched for time and being emotionally kind of wiped out. And so that did cause some spending. This is normal behavior for me. When I get stressed or exhausted, I dine out. This is behavior I have fought with myself every single month on these budgets, and I will continue to fight with myself every single month, probably for the next 10 years. This is a lifetime behavior that I'm working on trying to change, and I expect it's going to take a lifetime to change that. When I saw the numbers in week 2, first of all, there were several dining out transactions I didn't even remember. There were 2 I very much remembered and stuck out immediately as I was making those purchases, and those 2 kind of brought me back to my senses, and they're what caused me to go spend the large grocery bill, because I was like, this is ridiculous. I need to get this under control. But it was too little too late at that point. Well, not too little too late. I didn't do that soon enough. I wasn't aware of myself soon enough. In the transportation, I estimated $80, and I assume I'm going to need to fill my gas tank up once a week. And I know there's a possibility for taking the bus a couple of days. We have been working with one vehicle, and when that other family member went and had surgery, they weren't going to be driving for a period of time. They weren't going to be working for a period of time. So I was going to have full access to the vehicle. But I knew that once that person went back to work, that the car situation was going to go back for a while the way it was. For those of you who maybe aren't familiar what I'm referencing, my son and I currently were sharing a vehicle. We have 2 vehicles, but one has been broken down and has had some pretty significant repairs it has needed to have done on it. And honestly, every single time we make a repair, the second we get it back, within 2 weeks, then there's something else that comes up, and then there's something else that comes up, and then there's something else that comes up. So we had reached a point with that particular vehicle where we were just done. Tired of putting money into it, tired of not working, tired of thinking I can count on it, and I can't. And so initially, we were pretty hot in our emotions and we're just going to sell it, get rid of it, get a new vehicle. And that didn't happen. I don't know if you've looked at the cost of vehicles lately, but it's pretty exorbitant. And it, in the long run, was cheaper to fix the vehicle than to try and get a new one. So we did finally go get that done. And initially we brought it in to say, just look at all of the things, tell us everything that's wrong with it, and give us an estimate for what that entire cost was going to be. And they did. And the estimate was going to be $1,900. Well, that's fine. Let's get that taken care of. But then once they got into it and actually got all the repairs done, that was $3,440. The vehicle sat so long that the registration expired. It sat so long that the insurance had lapsed. And so those things still need to be taken care of. And I knew those weren't going to happen until after he went back to work. And so he would go back to work and there would be a period of time of working before the check would come that would get those things taken care of. So there was going to be more buses in that. So that was a very long story. Just to say, I had estimated $80. Ultimately, I only filled up the gas tank the one time, and I did not need to take the bus at all during this pay period. So I spent $39.44 in my transportation, which was $40.56 under what I had budgeted. And then in my art, I did not give myself anything in the art, and I did not spend anything in the arts for this pay period. So that is at $0. In my miscellaneous category, I did not give myself anything. I did end up spending $53.89. This all was either things related to surgery, as far as a basket for the walker, bandages, tape, grabber thing to pick things up from the floor, and things related to finally getting my possessions in my house. So I needed things like those little tiny dowels that go to help hold the furniture together as you're building it. I was missing one or two of those in a couple of my furniture pieces. Some shims to put under the furniture so that it leans up against the wall instead of away from the wall, and things like that. So things that were absolutely necessary. This miscellaneous was nothing that was just for fun. And so, but that was $53.89, more than I had put in the budget for that. So I'm not upset that that is in the red, but it is in the red. So when I set up my estimate, I thought I was going to be spending, or I gave myself an estimate of $360 in my flexible spending, but ultimately I spent $582.82 in spending, which was $222.82 more than I had estimated I would. I'm not upset about this miscellaneous being in the red, and I'm not upset about my groceries being in the red. Those two are necessary. But I'm a little irritated at myself with the dining out being in the red for a couple of reasons. One, this is a battle I fight with myself. So every time I screw up, and I'm going to say that in air quotes, but every time I make this mistake, I get frustrated with myself. How many times do I have to fight this fight? But also because I have some bills that are old debt that I want to get taken care of this month. And I knew when I set up this budget, it was going to be difficult for me to get those paid this month. But it was about this amount of money, maybe less than this by maybe $8 to $10. I could have paid those bills and been this $580, and been extra, and I would have had bills paid. Instead, I was extra and I have nothing to show for it. So that's why I'm kind of mad at myself, because this is almost directly the dollar for dollar the amount I would have had to spend on those bills. That's why I'm upset. I'm trying to get bills paid. I'm not trying to eat a cheeseburger. So when we go to my ending balance, I estimated $1188.45. I received $1271.74. That was $83.29 more than I estimated. My fixed expenses came out exactly as I had estimated. My flexible expenses, again, I estimated $360. My actual was $582.82, which was $222.82 over my estimated budget, which means I finished out. I assumed I was going to finish out when I set this up. I knew it was possible I would be $24.55 over. And when I set this up, I knew it was likely I was going to get a little bit more on my income. So this would probably counterbalance. But ultimately, I spent $164.08 more than I brought in this particular pay period, which was $139.53 more than I thought I would be. Now, once again, I'm not actually in the red. My bank account is not actually negative. I did have some carryover from the last month in finally receiving, when we were dealing with the car repair and when we were dealing with the surgery and when we were dealing with getting all of my U-Haul sent to me, that last week or two of June and all of July, right at the end, you remember I had sent money out of my income, and then it came back in, and then out and came back in, and out and came back in. That last amount that needed to come back to me did come back to me just before this. So I still had a little bit of carryover from that, and that has carried me over here. But that's pretty much gone now. So I don't have a whole lot extra. So as I look at this and I look at where my account is right now, I am wondering, am I really going to be able to get those bills done this month the way I had hoped? Or are they going to be put off one more month, which just is distressing for me. But I did it to myself, and I know the situation I was in. I definitely could have been more aware, but I didn't have any time off from work. In fact, I was working even more during all of this time, and I just was beyond my capabilities to go grocery shopping and then come home and cook at the end of everything I was doing. So I'm upset with myself. I don't know that many of those options or many of those choices I made would have been any different. I don't know. It's done. I can't undo it. So I'm not going to beat myself up about it anymore. But that is my closeout for paycheck number 1. We're just going to keep moving forward. Each day we're going to try again. And that is it for the budgeting portion of my video today, or as we close out paycheck number 1 for August. For those of you who've been with me for any length of time, you do know that I go over a craft at the end of my videos, and I try and keep the same craft for the entirety of my month. In the month of August, because of everything that was happening in July, I'm about 2 weeks behind. I'm playing a game of catch up right now. And so when I set up my project for August, I made sure to give myself something very small that didn't have any real big project, big end date, lots of steps involved in it. So I pulled out some of my old jeans that I had harvested, and specifically I got the pockets, the back pockets for the pants and the coin pockets from the front. And I've long wanted to turn those into pot holders and see how that goes. So that is what I have. If you saw as I'm going through and building up August, yesterday's video, I had just so initially I had just had the pieces apart, and then I sewed the coin pockets to the pants pocket, and I had these big gaps here, and then I had to take that off, sew fabric to the gaps, and then sew that back on, and that's where I was yesterday. So today what I've had to do is go and cut all of those weird shapes off and turn them into the smallest usable space I could with what I had. Now my back pants pockets are all very different sizes. I mean, look at the size difference from this one to the one underneath it. The coin pockets are all very different sizes, and so some of the shapes on some of these are all very different. But that is all that I have done today. So there's a little bit of forward movement, but not a lot. I've just cut those down. These are what the final shapes for each of these are going to be. They're all going to be slightly different based on the 2 pockets I had to work with. And so now the next step is going to just be getting the 3 layers of batting and getting some backing. Now I have the 3 layers of batting available and already pulled out, but what I don't have at this point in time is any backing. Most of my stuff is still packed in boxes. As I'm unpacking this time, I am taking an inventory of everything I have, and that is causing me to slow down. I mean, my first 2 boxes was literally 5 pages worth of writing stuff down. So far, the only options I have come up with are these here, and I'm not particularly happy with any of these. I have a whole bunch of, this is muslin, which is a super cheap kind of cotton fabric. I have purchased 2 bolts worth of this over the last couple of years. And this was for my apparel making. So when you are sewing a pattern, it never fits right. Just like when you go buy clothes off of the shelf, it never fits right. So when you make a pattern, you make it based on your sizes, and you do it in muslin, and then you make adjustments. So maybe the shoulders are too wide, maybe there's not enough in the hips, so you make it in muslin, make the adjustments you need to make to that pattern, and then you make it in your regular fabric. And so I have a ton of this muslin, and I had saved all of my scraps, which for whatever reason, your scraps in apparel sewing is called cabbage. So I had saved all of my cabbage, as well as all of the pieces that I made. And my initial plan was to dye all of these with some natural plant dyes. And I haven't gotten to that stage yet. I do have most of the things I would need to start the dyeing project, but that's too involved for this month I have available to me. So if I use the muslin, it would be just this natural color on the back side of that. I personally feel like that's too light of a color. Pot holders get filthy and dirty as it is. So I probably won't use that, but I have tons of it I could use. And the other thing is these 2, they're the same type of material, just different colors, but this is like a duck cloth or a canvas, really durable and dark colors that would take stains well. But I do feel like this is way too stiff of a fabric. I don't know how well that shows up, but this is stiff, thick, hardy material. And if I have this, plus the 2 layers of Insulbright, plus the 1 layer of batting, plus my jeans and those pockets, I feel like that's too much bulk to be manipulating, trying to reach into the stove and pull something hot out of the oven. So I don't think that these are ideal either. I do have a fabric that I think I would like to use, but I haven't found it in my unpacking yet. So I may overnight go on a mission to see if I can find the box that fabric is in and pull that out and see if I can, because that is a fabric, a color I really like, honestly similar but darker to what's in the background here. And I have a lot of it. I normally buy very small amounts of fabric to just get me through the project at hand. And if I don't have a project I'm specifically working on, then I just buy small batches. I'm not somebody who's like, oh, give me an extra 3 yards just in case. But in this one particular fabric that I'm thinking of, I needed some for a background on a project I was working on. And again, it was something I was working on kind of out of my head. And at the time, I wasn't sure exactly how much I was going to need. But I really liked it, so I gave myself extra. And then when the gal was cutting it, she cut the amount I needed and went to go roll it back up on the roll and realized that there was like 3/4, there was extra where there was a second cut in there. And so she just threw in that extra bit for extra. So I have a ton of it. Well, for me, what's a ton of it? It's probably 1.5 yards left of it. And I think it would be a good color against these as the background, and dark enough that it would hide some of those stains very well. So I'm going to look for that when I get off of work tonight and work on those tomorrow, maybe before my next video goes out. I wouldn't expect to have anything cut and stitched together at that point, but to be able to have the fabric and have all of the parts ready to go. So we'll see if I can find that or not. I have a stack of about 7 boxes to go through in the one room and probably another 12 to go through in the other room. So I'm hoping it's within that stack of in the one room, because I'm not going to get too crazy looking for that particular fabric. And as I'm going through boxes, I'll see what else I can find. So that is kind of where I'm at. I've got my shapes cut and I'm ready for the next size. I'm probably going to end up cutting this one. This was the very first one that I started cutting my shapes around this morning. And I don't think I like these extra flappy bits here. I don't feel like I like how big that is. I definitely liked when we got into these later pieces. Like this was the very last one I did. And I much prefer the shape of this one. So I may do some alterations here, but that is where I'm at as far as my pot holder project goes. My main fronts are done and I need to go find a back and whatever I'm going to use for binding around the edges. So that will slowly start moving forward over the next couple of days. And that's really all I have for you guys today. I want to thank you for joining me on my budgeting journey, especially as I'm really behind at this point. So as you're watching these videos, I'm roughly 2 weeks behind schedule. So I appreciate you watching, even though it's not the most current timeline. And I appreciate you sticking around for the end for my craft project. A few of you have mentioned that that's part of why you're here. You appreciate that I am including that, and I appreciate your feedback with that. So I thank you guys so much for sticking along with me. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing today, please have some fun. Bye-bye now.